Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here to talk about our full moon, which is happening in the star of Jyestha at the end of Scorpio. And this is the full moon that is at the apex of a cycle that began in Taurus. So we have been in this cycle of comfort and security and our values. And now we're seeing the other end of that axis, which is our emotional turmoil, facing our fears, the unknown, the things we can't control. This full moon is happening, I should say, on June 11th at 12:45 a.m. here in California. So I'm in California right now. In Hawaii, it's going to be at 9:45 p.m. on the 10th. So on Tuesday night in Hawaii. And really here as well, because 12:45 a.m. is not when most people are rising for the morning. So that fullest part of the moon will be seen Tuesday. So we we need to look here at what what we feel when we're out of control. When we are in a situation, which is most situations that are out of our hands. Taurus is really where things are in our hands, right? We can feed ourselves, we can, clean ourselves, we can get enough rest, we can move our bodies. Like we have a lot of choices and volition in terms of caretaking for our bodies and our maybe our mental health and well-being, which is why the moon is exalted there. Well, the moon is debilitated in Scorpio because it's where we feel all the things we cannot control. We can't control other people. That's the number one thing. And not just one other person, although that's the most terrifying, is that in our relationships, we don't actually have control over what the other person chooses to do. We don't have control over their diet. We don't have control over their state of mind of peace. We can't make sure they get enough rest, right? And furthermore, we can't control if they stay with us or not, or if they choose to continue to connect or if they disengage. And this is probably the biggest fear that we actually have is this abandonment. And it's harsher when it's one person to whom we've trusted than it is even when it's a collective, because we can make it's easier to say, well, I didn't necessarily, I didn't have much in common with that group of people anyway, or, to have some other story around that. But if we are to be abandoned completely by all groups of people, that's of course a basic human survival issue. Like not being accepted by the group means you'll probably die. And this is why Scorpio is the natural eighth house. And the eighth house is not just things that are out of our control. It's the biggest thing that's out of our control, which is our death. And so this is a place where we go through many trials and tribulations. And the first part of it is actually that star the last full moon was in, which is a star that bridges Libra and Scorpio. It's called Vishaka. It's that like long path that we take through the dark woods, trusting that there's a finish line. And the next star, which is actually where the moon is right now as I'm making this video, is called Anuradha. And this is the star of devotion, the star of almost faith and forgiveness and understanding and reconciliation with all that we cannot control by sort of offering it up and accepting it. Um, the third star, which is where our full moon is called Jyestha. And this is the place where we have to really get a little bit more physical and a little more like the warrior part of Scorpio comes out. This star is ruled by Indra, who is the king of the gods. And he creates some folly through his ego. He makes choices to, boast maybe too much or to create situations where he snubs other people. And in the particular story that's often associated with the star, it's his own guru. It's Brihaspati. And as a result, he loses that counsel for all the devas, not just himself, for a very long time. And the asuras the beings without light are able to really gain a lot of power in this time because without counsel, the devas are lost, right? Without their guru. And so the asuras end up getting a lot of power. A lot of different things take place to the point where essentially this demon named Vritra is born and he drinks all the earth's water. And Indra has to find him in his cave that he's hiding in, holding all the earth's water. And he has to stab him with his vajra, with his lightning bolt, and return the waters to the world. And he does this. So he shows up in courage. He shows up with the bravery needed to be the hero of the day. But you can't forget that he also caused the problem, right? His ego getting out of hand was what initiated the situation to begin with. And this is something we all have to look at in our lives. It's like very easy to see the outside world and the outside problems. Maybe the problems in your relationship. It's very easy to see what the other person's doing wrong. It's very much harder to look at what we could do differently. And really, when we get into the realm of Scorpio, if we're not doing the inner work, we're not doing the outer work. We can walk around and blame all we want. We can walk around feeling like victims all we want, and we can lash out at others all we want. But we really have to do that inner work. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see that we have, at this moment, we have this drishti, and actually I have this on the full moon at the moment, but I'm just going to flip this back. This is the 9th that I'm making this video. And we have, and of course it's not 12:45 a.m., but we'll just go with that. You can see Mars is giving really direct drishti here right now as I speak. And he is now out of the Gandanta. The Gandanta goes to 1 degree of Leo. And so his gaze is going to be very soft on the actual full moon because the degrees are just very far off. When we saw those degrees for 2 days from now is 26, 26, and he's at 226. The numbers are wonderful, but the degrees are so far that that fourth house drishti isn't going to be very strong by the full moon. It's really strong right now. And even yesterday or through the evening into the early morning today. So we can see how this is actually being reflected. Of course, I'm in Los Angeles right now, and I keep hearing, you know, the news about what's happening in downtown LA. And this is the kind of thing that we can see just from Mars and K2 in general. Like this is what I've been talking about with Mars moving into the sign of Leo, with K2 there, and the clash that is going to come about in a very militant, intense, and explosive way. So this is like the beginning of it, right? It's we have a while to go before the two come very close together. It's July 20th when they come together, and we're at June 10th, June 9th. Um, this is June 11th because of the full moon, but if we're talking about today, it's actually June 9th. So this energy that's building is just beginning. And that drishti of Mars on the moon in her own sign of Scorpio, I mean, in his own sign of Scorpio, Mars's own sign of Scorpio, is really giving us that courage we need to face what we need to, what we're afraid of. And of course, for each of us, it's a different place in our chart. Scorpio is a different house for us. So, for Scorpio people, it's around their own identity. For Taurus rising, it's around their relationship. So for each of us, it's a different area of our life. But the activation of the Mars in Leo, where we really step into our power and activate through that place, reflecting onto a moon that feels less stable and more insecure, gives us the courage we need to pull off this act of bravado that we need in Jyestha. So we're getting that infusion right now as I make this video, and it's going to help us build that courage in order to face what demons we need to face, both inside of us and outside of us for this full moon. So it's really, it's really a powerful transit because Mars has been in debilitation for a very long time in Cancer. And before that, he was in Gemini, where he's not as physically activated as he needs to be. And then before that he was in Cancer again, right? And before that he was in Gemini. Like it's been this dance that he's been doing for over 9 months. So he's finally moved into a fire sign where he's very powerful. And he's able to follow the marching orders of the king. And for each of us, we can look at that again in this reflection we're seeing in global events, and particularly, in the particular place I am right now, I can see it activating through actual, National Guard and police being sent into the city. That's very Mars K2, police, military, things like that. And I've been saying this is like, you can see like a coup happening at this time. Like you could see there's a desire to also overtake power that's beneath the surface. And that part hasn't really exploded yet. But in each of our lives, we also have that setup. We have kind of the director or the president or the king of our little human ship. And we have the marching orders that take place, that act out. And when Mars is in Cancer, he's like, I'm kind of tired. I don't feel like doing my push-ups today. When Mars is in Leo, it's like, okay, I'm willing to do whatever push-ups I need to do or whatever action I need to take as long as it's in service of something higher. As long as it's in service of the thing that is higher to me. So what's holding you? Where's the service coming from? Well, our sun is actually in a state of Sandhi. He's mobilizing himself in just a few days. We have the full moon was on the 11th, and here we have on the 14th. Of course, this is 12:45 a.m. Um, because that's when the full moon was, but later on this day, we have him closer to the evening in California time, we have him moving into Gemini. So this is a state of instability at all when the sun is moving signs. We always see ourselves feeling a little bit less landed in our power and our authority and our capacity to lead, again, our own little human ship. But he's moving from an earth sign where he wasn't in the best dignity into a air sign where his dignity is increasingly challenged by the presence of Jupiter and Mercury. Even though Jupiter and the sun are friends, and Mercury actually welcomes the sun enough into his own sign. They're not exactly besties, but they're but he's welcome there. Um, but when the ruler of a sign is in it, it's actually not good for other planets. If they were debilitated, which no planet is in Gemini, then it would be helpful. Like Venus is debilitated in Virgo, Mercury's other sign. When Mercury and Venus are there together, they form what's called Nicha Bhanga, which it helps the debilitated Venus. But in this case, nobody's debilitated, and it's actually just kind of a crowded house. The sun's not able to shine his full power. Jupiter's not really able to be the counselor, the teacher, that guru. And Jupiter's not really able to do that anyway in Gemini. When Jupiter's in Gemini, we learn and teach from information, and we often lack wisdom. And so we already have a Jupiter that's kind of muddled in the details and not really able to see the bigger picture. And now the sun is also in this very detail-oriented sign. And we have to understand with Gemini, in Virgo, the details are all getting organized, but in Gemini, the details are like this constantly flowing river. It can feel very chaotic. If you know people who have planets in Gemini, particularly their moon, their rising sign, or multiple planets there, they often it's difficult to like keep track of what they're talking about because they're just constantly spewing information or moving on to the next piece of information. It's a very ungrounded place in the sky. And so the sun is receiving his source, his power from not just a sea of information, like a sea, a moving river of information. And it's ever changing. And you kind of get caught up in just the information itself. And we sometimes forget to create meaning from what it is that we're receiving. And particularly to create meaning that is meaningful, that has a root of truth in it. So this is going to be really interesting, and the sun again is just destabilized just by moving, and it's the ruler of Leo. So in these few days right around the full moon and right after, we are going to see that the power itself is feeling like like okay, am I about the material and the security, or am I about trying to understand something and my curiosity, my information, and the facts that are coming my way. And that in itself creates a destabilization. So many layers here. And of course, Jupiter and Mercury are also in the star of Ardra, which is a tumultuous star. It's a star of the storm, of the bringing down of power in some ways, but the ultimate creative power. It's also a star where we tend to create more negativity if we allow our minds to just go rampant. If we don't meditate and we don't pull ourselves in, then we can really let the negative thoughts become, you know, become the like out of control, like gremlins, they're just like drops of water and many of them start to burst out. And that's something we need to be careful of here, particularly, again, I moved this to when the sun was moving signs, but if we move to uh, right after the full moon, so the full moon was happening at like 12:45 a.m. here in Hawaii, but look, even by evening time of this same day, we have the moon in Mula, and oh, Jupiter's across from it, but he's in Mrigashira then, so he moves into Ardra a little bit later. Okay, well, that's a positive thing because I was thinking that Jupiter and Ardra across from the moon and Mula creates the axis. Of course, Mercury's in Ardra, but Mercury's in his own sign in Gemini. So Mercury is the one who's doing the best, which means that our capacity to access good information and use our discernments is raised by having Mercury in power here. It's more that our sense of power and authority is shaky, and our sense of judgment and wisdom and the bigger picture is also in a state that could be less aligned. But our capacity to comb through facts and information and to understand what we're reading and to even communicate it is going to be stronger because Mercury is in his own sign. And he's also, in these higher degrees than the other two planets. So when they all get together, we call it a Yuddha or a war, which there's a lot of signs of war in this moment, and he's kind of winning that war. But it does look like Jupiter is not going to actually be out of in Ardra until he's kind of past that point of drishti with the moon. The moon will already be in um, well into Purvashada by the time he gets into Mrigashira. Actually, he's already in Uttarashada by the time he gets into Ardra. So we don't have that full galactic plane of Jupiter. But what I was reflecting on when I did my weekly stars report was just how Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius there. And when the moon does go into Mula, which, we just finished Mars crossing the Gandanta point, and now we have the moon crossing the Gandanta point after this full moon, like I said, on the 11th, we, I'll move it back. Now that I found my answer of when he goes into Ardra, I'll move him back. We have our beliefs holding this space of wanting to kind of uproot or find the roots of why we believe what we believe. But Jupiter is in this fact-finding mission across the way. But he's in Drishti with that moon. So it's his own sign. Mercury is also in Drishti with this moon as it gets later degrees. But again, Mercury is in his own sign and giving a positive reflection of our capacity for discernment and our capacity to look through the information. Jupiter is going to be more confused about where to get the beliefs. The beliefs are more scattered in Gemini. And Mula is trying to pinpoint the root of like, this is what's wrong. And it's more difficult to do that job when Jupiter's in, kind of flailing about. And even though he's not going to be in Ardra, which creates this sort of explosive galactic plane, he's in Mrigashira, where he's seeking. He's seeking. So it's like a search that isn't found. And yet in the meantime, our heart and our mind in Mula might be inclined to rip things out even without the verification that that indeed is the problem that we need to root out. So I think that can create some extra chaos in this really already somewhat chaotic time that we are entering into and in already. Um, this, like I said, this window with Mars and K2 together, it promises to be explosive, right? And this is really just the beginning. But at the same time, there's a need to kind of shake up everything in order to have more clarity. So whatever comes on the other end of this alignment of this summer is likely to bring us closer to some form of truth. It's not, Mars is in good dignity here um in Leo, and our courage to face what we need to face in this full moon is it might not feel pleasant. Sometimes things don't feel pleasant that are ultimately good for us. So this is a moment that feels unstable and feels a little chaotic and also might feel unpleasant, particularly if you're not very comfortable with your anger or you're not very comfortable with your Mars energy. For people who are more comfortable with their fiery energy or cutting things off or, exploding things and being in a kind of battle type mode, this might be an easier transit. But for all of us, we have an opportunity here to really reflect upon not just our our sense of action and what we do and don't stand up for outside of us, but what are we not looking at within ourselves as well. There's all these things happening in the world that we might ignore or avoid and then they explode, but how many things are inside of us that we are choosing to ignore or avoid that are also exploding? And generally speaking, even if you're in a very uh, chaotic environment, if your sense of inner peace is present, you can maintain that even in pretty high levels of chaos. Obviously, there's life and death situations that might bring you out of that peace, but more often than not, people who, tend towards meditating or reckoning with themselves in such a way where they're not at the whims of the world handle emergency situations very well because they don't lose their cool. So if you're not already meditating, and you're not already finding ways to really control the monkey mind, that's something that's really important to do. And this is a great week to focus on that. Coming out of this Taurus cycle with the sun, where we really focus on our bodies and our health and our security and our wealth and all of these kind of things. We need to focus on our mind right now in this period. It's because it's not just the sun in Gemini, right? It's Jupiter and it's Mercury, and we're coming out of this emotional turmoil that is a Scorpio full moon. And so even though the cycle began in Taurus, there's this heavy hitting planetary alignment there in Gemini. And with the explosiveness of Mars and K2 getting closer together, it'll be more easy to propagate the negative thoughts, the negative ideas, the negative beliefs. So we really want to focus our mind and kind of corral those thoughts and bring ourselves back to a state of calm as much as possible. Because, you know, yeah, I'll leave it at that. So, blessings on this full moon and on this entire transit. If you're part of my member group, I have a weekly transit report I do, and this week's transit report for your sign, your personal weekly forecast, also includes Sun and Gemini for your sign and this full moon for your sign. So you can get that at patreon.com. Radha Home Astrology and Cosmically Aligned is the name of the member group if you want to join the member group to get those personal transits. And then also for my members, I'm going to be doing a Mars K2 for all signs live discussion where we bring your charts in and we talk about Mars and K2 alignment for each of the 12 rising signs and what's really being activated. And when we use people's charts, you'll see that they have planets in those places. So we get to talk about that a little bit too. Like, if, what happens if you have planets in Leo? What happens, when your Mars is your ruler? All the different things that bring nuance to the discussion. So if you are a member of Cosmically Aligned, I will see you there. If you are not, you should become one. And if you like this video, please like, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. And I will see you soon. Namaste.